I thought I had raised a daughter with a conscience. But $33 million can rot a soul faster than you would believe. She threw me out of the very house I built for her, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back. Yet 3 days later, she was crawling back to me, trembling in terror. She made a mistake thinking she held all the cards. She forgot that I was the one who taught her how to play. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I have spent the last 30 years of my life balancing ledgers for Brightwell and Company. I am 58 years old, and if you looked at my bank account, you would see a life defined by subtraction rather than addition. I have always been the woman who brings a packed lunch to the office and wears the same grey coat until the fabric wears thin at the elbows. I did not live this way because I lacked ambition. I lived this way because I had a purpose. And her name was Marissa. Marissa is 32 now. She was the sun around which my quiet little world revolved. After my husband, Frank, passed away from a heart attack 2 decades ago, I poured every ounce of my energy into her. I turned down the position of senior partner twice because it required travel. I wanted to be there to make her breakfast. I wanted to ensure the tuition for her private university was paid in full without her ever needing a student loan. I thought I was buying her a future. I never imagined I was financing my own obsolescence. The drift happened slowly. It started when she began dating a man from a family whose name appeared on hospital wings. Suddenly, my pot roast was too greasy, and our living room in Ravensville was too small. This house is not a palace, but it is the keeper of my history. The walls hold the faint scent of Frank's pipe tobacco, and the garden still blooms with the hydrangeas my mother planted. It is a good home. It is a paid-off home. But to Marissa, it had become a cage she was desperate to escape. We used to talk every Sunday evening. That was our ritual. But lately, the phone remained silent. I would see photos of her on social media, holding glasses of champagne on boats that cost more than my entire retirement fund. Her smile in those pictures looked sharp, almost predatory. It was not the smile of the little girl who used to cry when a bird hit our window. I sat in my kitchen last Tuesday, staring at a cold cup of tea. The silence in the house felt heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. I tried to tell myself that this was just a phase. I told myself, she is just finding herself. She will come back when she remembers who loves her. But a mother knows, deep in the pit of my stomach. I felt a gnawing sensation. It was the same feeling I had the morning the police came to tell me about Frank. It was the quiet vibration in the air before a storm breaks the sky open. I looked at the family portrait on the mantel. Marissa looked so innocent in that photo. But the stranger posting pictures from high-rise penthouses was someone I no longer recognized. I washed my teacup and dried it with a towel. I placed it in the cupboard, aligning the handle perfectly to the right. Order. I needed order because chaos was scratching at the door. Then the landline rang. It was a jarring sound in the quiet house. I picked it up, expecting a telemarketer, or perhaps, if I was lucky, Marissa apologizing for missing Sunday. It was neither. A voice I did not recognize spoke on the other end. It was low and distorted, like gravel grinding against metal. Eleanor Hartley. Yes, I said. Who is this? It doesn't matter who I am, the voice replied. It matters what is coming. You need to prepare yourself. Eleanor, your daughter has made a move, and the fallout is going to land right on your doorstep. The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stood there in the hallway, gripping the receiver until my knuckles turned white. The silence rushed back in. But this time, It was not empty. It was filled with a terrifying anticipation. My life as I knew it had just ended, even if I did not yet know how. The warning from the anonymous caller was still echoing in my mind when a low rumble shook the front window. I pulled back the curtain. A sleek, black luxury sedan, the kind I had only seen in magazines, was idling at the curb. Two men in dark suits stepped out, opening the back door with practiced precision. Marissa emerged. She looked radiant, but it was a synthetic kind of radiance. Her dress likely cost more than my annual salary, and diamonds glittered at her throat. She marched up the walkway, the bodyguards trailing behind her like shadows. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mum," she cried out, her voice pitched too high, too frantic. "Pack your bags. We are celebrating." I stood frozen in the doorway. "Marissa, what is going on? Who are these men?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Security. Necessary precautions. Mom, listen to me. I did it. I invested in a tech fund 6 months ago. Everyone said I was crazy, but it paid off." She grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging in. $33 million. That is what hit my account this morning. 33 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. 33 million, Marissa. That kind of money. It does not just appear. "Stop worrying," she snapped, her smile faltering for a second before plastering it back on. "You are done. Mom, no more Brightwell and Company, no more clipping coupons. You are going to enjoy life." She pushed past me into the living room. Suddenly, the air in the house felt different. She was not looking at her childhood home with nostalgia. She was looking at it with disgust. She ran a finger along the mantel, checking for dust. "This place," she muttered. "It is so small. It smells like old wood and stagnation." She turned to me, her eyes cold. "You need to move out. Mom, I am going to tear this down. We will build something modern here, something that reflects who we are now." "Tear it down," I whispered. "Marissa, your father built that porch. We planted the oak tree in the back together. This is my home. I am not going anywhere." She laughed, but it was a brittle, hollow sound. "We will see about that. I thought it was just the arrogance of sudden wealth, a temporary madness. I was wrong." 3 days later, a man in a pinstripe suit knocked on my door. He introduced himself as Mr. Sterling, Marissa's attorney. He handed me a thick envelope. "What is this?" I asked, my hands shaking as I opened it. "Notice to vacate, Mr. Sterling said without a hint of sympathy. "The property is jointly owned. As the majority shareholder of the new development trust, which now holds her 50% interest, Ms. Hartley has successfully petitioned for a partition by sale to the trust. Since you cannot afford to buy out her share at the current inflated market evaluation, you are being evicted to facilitate the demolition." I stared at him. 5 years ago, I had added Marissa's name to the deed. I did it to save her from inheritance taxes when I died. I did it because I wanted to protect her. I had handed her the knife, and now she was pressing it against my throat. She cannot do this." I stammered. "I am her mother. It is entirely legal." "Mrs. Hartley," he replied. Marissa arrived an hour later. She did not look me in the eye. She just signaled to a locksmith who began drilling into my front door. The sky had turned a bruised purple, and a cold rain began to fall, soaking the pavement. Why, I asked her, standing on the porch as the locksmith worked. "Marissa, Why are you doing this? She refused to look at me. She stared at her phone, her thumb scrolling frantically. It is just business, Mum. You were always holding on too tight to the past. I am freeing you. You are throwing me out, I said, my voice steady despite the breaking of my heart. Just go. Mom, she screamed suddenly, her composure cracking. Go to a hotel, I will pay for it. Just get away from here. She was shaking. It was not the tremble of anger. It was the tremble of fear. I went inside one last time. I did not fight the bodyguards. I packed a single suitcase with my clothes, my journal, and the photo of Frank. I walked out into the rain. The locksmith slammed the door behind me, the sound final and hollow like a gunshot. I stood on the sidewalk, water dripping from my hair. Marissa was watching me from the window of her luxury car. She looked pale. She looked terrified. She had $33 million, yet she looked like a cornered animal. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. She thought she had won. She thought she had discarded me. But as I walked toward the bus stop, I did not feel defeated. I felt a cold clarity settling over me. My daughter was not just a greedy monster. She was in trouble. And she had just made the mistake of creating an enemy out of the only person who could have saved her. The neon sign outside my window buzzed with a dying, electric hum, casting a sickly red light across the cheap bedspread. I was staying at the Greywater Motel, a place situated on the edge of town where people go when they want to disappear or when they have nowhere else to land. The carpet in room 12 smelled of stale cigarette smoke and harsh industrial cleaner. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. I am 58 years old. I have worked every day since I was 22, and now my entire life fits into one battered suitcase and a plastic grocery bag. Every evening. I sat at the wobbly laminate desk and opened my leather-bound journal. I wrote furiously, pressing the pen so hard into the paper that it nearly tore through to the next page. I was trying to map out the geography of my daughter's betrayal. I wrote down memories, searching for the moment the rot had set in. Was it when she demanded a new car for her 16th birthday? Was it the way she looked at the waiter when he got her order wrong last Thanksgiving? I was trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces were made of jagged glass. The local newspaper lay on the nightstand. The headline screamed in bold black ink, "Local miracle Ravensville native Marissa Hartley strikes gold." The article described her as a visionary investor, a savvy young woman who had conquered the tech world. There was a photo of her standing in front of my house, our house, wearing oversized sunglasses and looking like royalty. I read the caption and felt bile rise in my throat. They called her a self-made woman. They did not mention the mother she had kicked into the gutter to clear the view. My phone chimed with messages from numbers I recognized from Brightwell and Company, colleagues, friends, or so I had thought. Eleanor. I heard the news. I am so sorry. If you need anything, let me know. Thinking of you. This is just awful. I deleted them all. I did not want their pity. Pity is a heavy coat that keeps you warm but weighs you down so you cannot move. I needed to move. I put on my best blouse, ironed on the motel ironing board, and went to work the next morning. I needed the routine. I needed to balance the books to feel like the world still made sense. But when I swiped my badge, the light turned red. Mr. Henderson, the senior partner, met me in the lobby. He looked pained, clutching a file folder to his chest. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Can we talk in the side office? I followed him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Is there a problem with the quarterly reports? I can explain the discrepancies in the "it isn't the work," he interrupted, avoiding my eyes. It is the situation. We have heard about the eviction, the police involvement. The board feels that given the high stress of your personal life right now, you are a liability. We deal with sensitive financial data. Eleanor. We cannot afford mistakes caused by emotional instability. I stood up, my legs trembling. I have given this company 30 years. I am the most stable person in this building. I am sorry, he said, sliding a severance package across the table. It is effective immediately. Please, don't make a scene. I walked out of the building carrying a box of personal effects. The sun was shining, but the world looked grey. I sat on a park bench and watched the pigeons fight over a crust of bread. I thought about Marissa again. I remembered a day from her childhood when she stole a bracelet from a friend and lied about it with a face of perfect innocence. She had liked the shiny object, so she took it. Was it that simple? Was she just a magpie who had finally found a shiny object big enough to destroy her mother? For I wanted to hate her. I tried to hate her. But beneath the anger, there was a terrible, aching void. I still felt that something was wrong. Marissa was selfish. Yes, but she was not cruel. The fear I had seen in her eyes that day in the rain haunted me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was not a contact I knew. There was no number displayed, just a blocked ID. I swiped the screen to open the message. You need to protect yourself. The money isn't clean. She didn't win a lottery. She sold her soul. I stared at the screen until the backlight timed out, and the world went dark again. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air settled into my bones. I was right. This was not just about greed. This was about survival. And for the first time in days, the accountant in me woke up. If the numbers did not add up, it was time to find the error. I could not sit in that motel room and rot while the world spun out of control. I needed answers, and I knew how to find them. I spent 30 years finding the truth hidden in columns of numbers, and I was not about to stop now. I went to a payphone 3 blocks away, unwilling to trust the cell phone that might be monitored. I dialed the number of David, an old friend who worked in internal auditing for a large firm in the city. Eleanor, his voice was tight. You shouldn't be calling me. Things are sensitive right now. I need to know about the fund. David, I said, clutching the receiver. The one Marissa is involved with, the Apex Horizon Fund. Please. There was a long pause on the line. It is a house of cards. Eleanor. The SEC has been sniffing around them for months. Rumor has it they are running a massive insider trading scheme disguised as a tech incubator. If Marissa took $33 million from them, she is holding a grenade with the pin pulled. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It made sense. I thought back to the months before the eviction. Marissa would pace the hallway of our home late at night, whispering into her phone. I had assumed she was arguing with a boyfriend. I remembered hearing her say, I can't sign that. It's too much. I had thought she was talking about a lease or a loan. Now I realized she might have been negotiating her own destruction. I hung up and called a former junior accountant from Brightwell who had left the industry last year. They tried to recruit me. She told me, her voice shaking. They wanted me to cook the books. Eleanor. They wanted me to inflate the quarterly projections to lure in investors. They call it profit washing. I said no. But Marissa, she always wanted the shortcut. Was she a victim? Or was she a willing participant? The question gnawed at me. Later that afternoon, my personal cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it, expecting another reporter. Mrs. Hartley, a deep voice said. I recognized it immediately. It was the head of the security detail Marissa had hired, the man who had stood on my porch while I was evicted. What do you want? I asked. Stop digging, he said. You are asking questions to the wrong people. If you want to stay healthy, you will enjoy your retirement and forget you have a daughter. Is that a threat? It is a professional courtesy, he replied, and the line went dead. I returned to the motel room, but I did not cower. I sat at the desk and opened a fresh notebook. I began to construct a timeline. I wrote down dates, times of Marissa's strange behavior, and the names of the companies associated with the fund. I treated it like a forensic audit. As I logged into my old email to check for any past correspondence, I noticed something alarming. There were 6 failed login attempts on my personal cloud account in the last 24 hours. Someone was trying to get in. They were not just trying to keep me out of the house. They were looking for something I possessed. I decided to go out for air to clear my head. It was past midnight. The streetlights flickered overhead as I walked down the empty sidewalk near the motel. The air was thick with humidity. I heard footsteps behind me. Hard, deliberate steps. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. Faster this time. The footsteps matched my pace. I gripped my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not turn around. I turned a sharp corner and ducked into the motel lobby, breathing hard. Through the glass, I saw a dark figure pause under the street lamp, look toward the door, and then turn away. They were watching me. I went up to my room and locked the deadbolt. I pushed the heavy dresser in front of the door. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharp. They thought fear would make me disappear. They were wrong. I looked at the timeline in my notebook. If they were watching me, it meant I was dangerous to them. And if I was dangerous, I still had power. I was not going to be the victim in this story. I was going to be the auditor who brought the whole corrupt ledger crashing down. The phone rang at 2 a.m. It jolted me awake in the darkness of the motel room, a harsh sound against the silence that I had become used to. I looked at the screen. It was Marissa. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the decline button. I had too much pride to be summoned like a servant after being discarded like trash. But the mother in me, that stubborn, foolish part of my heart, answered. Mom. Her voice was a jagged whisper, barely audible over the static. Mom. Are you there? I am here, I said, sitting up and pulling the thin blanket around my shoulders. What do you want? Marissa. Do you need me to sign another waiver so you can demolish the garage? No. Stop. Please. She sobbed. I could hear her hyperventilating on the other end. I need to see you. Everything is falling apart. It is all falling down. Mom, I don't know what to do. Where are you, Cooper's Diner? On 4th Street, please. Come now. Cooper's Diner. The name brought a sudden ache to my chest. It was the place we used to go every Tuesday evening after her piano lessons when she was a teenager. We would share a milkshake and talk about her dreams of moving to the city. That felt like a lifetime ago. I dressed in the dark and drove my old sedan through the rain-slicked streets. When I walked into the diner, the smell of frying bacon and old coffee hit me. It was empty, save for a lone trucker at the counter and a figure huddled in the back booth. It was Marissa, but it was not the imperious woman who had stood on my porch 3 days ago. The designer dress was gone, replaced by a baggy grey sweatshirt. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy knot. She looked small. She looked 5 years old again. I slid into the booth opposite her. She looked up, and I saw the dark circles bruising the skin under her eyes. She was shaking. "You look terrible," I said flatly. "They froze it," she whispered, leaning across the table, her eyes darting to the window as if she expected the police to burst in. The accounts, all of them. The $33 million. It is gone. Frozen by the federal government yesterday afternoon. I felt a cold satisfaction mix with my fear. I warned you. I told you that kind of money does not come without strings. It isn't just strings. Mum. It is a noose, she hissed, tears streaming down her face. The partners. The men who brought me into the deal. They are terrified. They contacted me an hour ago. They want me to take the fall. They said I have to sign a confession saying I managed the fund alone. They said if I don't, they will destroy me. I looked at her hands. They were trembling so violently that the water in her glass was rippling. "So you called me because you need help. After you threw me out on the street, I didn't do that to hurt you," she cried out, her voice cracking. "I did it to save you." I stared at her. "Save me. You humiliated me. You took my home." I had to cut the tie, she insisted, grabbing my hand. Her palms were sweating. I knew the investigation was coming. I knew they would look at anyone connected to me. If we were close, if we lived together, they would have dragged you into it. They would have seized the house as an asset. I thought if I kicked you out, legally, publicly, it would look like we were estranged. I thought it would keep you clean. I pulled my hand away. The logic was twisted, a distorted rationalization of a guilty conscience. She had not done it to save me. She had done it to simplify her own narrative. She had treated her mother like a liability on a balance sheet, something to be written off to lower the risk. "You chose yourself," I said, my voice quiet and hard. "You chose to protect your scheme, and you sacrificed me to do it. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You just disposed of me." I was scared. Marissa buried her face in her hands. "I am so sorry. Mom, I am so scared. You have to help me. I don't know how to fix this." I looked at my daughter, weeping in a booth at a 24-hour diner. I saw the terror in her posture, but I also saw something else. She was still holding back. She was apologizing for the eviction, but she was not telling me everything about the men she was working with. She was desperate. Yes, but she was still calculating. "I cannot fix this for you. Marissa," I said, standing up. "You broke it. But I will tell you this. If you think signing that confession will save you, you are even more foolish than I thought." I turned to leave, but stopped. "And Marissa, do not lie to me again. I know about the money laundering, and I know you are not just a victim in this." I walked out into the rain, leaving her staring after me with her mouth open. I felt a heavy weight in my stomach. Her apology was desperate, but it was not enough. And as I unlocked my car, I knew the reality was far worse than she was admitting. She was not just being asked to take the blame. She was being set up to be the only one who would go down. The anonymous messages did not stop. They arrived in a steady stream throughout the morning, pinging my phone with the relentless rhythm of a dripping faucet. These were not just warnings anymore. They were documents, screenshots of internal ledgers, email chains with redacted names, and wire transfer receipts. I printed them all out at the motel front desk, paying 10 cents a page, my hands shaking as I organized the chaotic pile of evidence. I needed professional eyes on this. I took a taxi to the office of Arthur Vance, a criminal defense attorney who had handled a tax audit for a client of mine years ago. He was expensive, but he was discreet. Arthur spent an hour reading through the file, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. The silence in the room was suffocating. Finally. He looked up, his expression grim. "Eleanor, your daughter is in significant trouble," he said, tapping a finger on a highlighted email. "If these documents are authentic, the Apex Horizon Fund is operating a classic Ponzi scheme. But with a digital twist, they are using new investor capital to pay off early stakeholders and siphoning the rest offshore. Marissa is listed as the managing partner on the filings. If she cannot prove she was coerced, she is looking at 20 years in federal prison. She told me she was pressured," I said. "She said they made her sign things. The law does not care about pressure unless there is proof of duress," Arthur replied. "But there is something else. Look at page 15. I slid the paper toward me. It was an authorization form for a secondary offshore account, dated 3 years ago. At the bottom was a signature in blue ink, Eleanor Hartley. My breath hitched in my throat. I never signed this. I have never seen this account in my life. It is a clumsy forgery, Arthur noted, but it is legally binding until proven otherwise. Whoever set this up did not just want to use Marissa. They wanted a backup scapegoat. If the heat gets too high on your daughter, they are preparing to point the finger at you. They will claim the veteran accountant mother was the mastermind behind the scenes. A cold fury settled in my stomach. This was why they wanted me out of the house. This was why my accounts were being probed. They were planting evidence. I left Arthur's office with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with my age. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a man in a tan overcoat bumped into me, hard. I stumbled, nearly dropping my bag. "Watch where you are going," I snapped. He did not apologize. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale mints. "You are digging a grave, Mrs. Hartley," he whispered, his voice flat and terrifying. "Stop asking questions. Go back to your motel and watch television. If you keep pulling at the threads, you are going to strangle yourself." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. They were watching me. They knew where I was. But instead of fear, I felt a surge of adrenaline. They had made a critical error. By forging my signature, they had made this personal. It was no longer just about saving Marissa. It was about saving myself. I returned to the motel and spread the papers across the bed. I called the number of the former employee who had spoken to me before. She picked up on the first ring. They used her because she was perfect for the role. She told me, "Marissa is beautiful, ambitious, and, forgive me, Eleanor, she's not detail-oriented. She's the clean face. The investors see her and think it is a fresh, legitimate startup. They do not see the sharks swimming in the water behind her." I hung up and focused on the numbers. I am an accountant. People lie, but numbers do not. If you know how to look, the math always tells the story. I began to trace the flow of funds through the maze of shell companies listed in the documents. It took me 6 hours. My eyes burned, and my back ached. But finally, I saw the pattern. The $33 million Marissa had received was not a payout. It was a transfer of liability. They had dumped the dirty money into her account to wash their hands of it right before the investigation started. But as I tracked the most recent movements, I saw something even more alarming. The assets were not just frozen. They had been leveraged against a loan from a holding company in the Cayman Islands 2 days before the freeze order. The money was technically gone, transferred to a new entity. I looked at the name on the final receiving account. It was not a company. It was a trust managed by a single individual. I did not recognize the name yet, but I knew what this meant. Marissa was penniless. I was being framed. And someone was sitting on a mountain of stolen cash while we were left to burn. I closed the ledger with a snap. I was the only one who could untangle this knot, and I was done being afraid. I followed the trail of the money through a labyrinth of shell companies, my eyes straining against the dim light of the motel lamp. The deeper I dug into the history of the Apex Horizon Fund, the darker the water became. It was not just a Ponzi scheme. The capital calls traced back to a syndicate in Nevada, known for laundering gambling proceeds. This was heavy, organized crime, and my daughter was standing right in the center of the bullseye. Among the leaked documents on my laptop screen, I found a forwarded email thread that made my blood run cold. It was sent to Marissa's private account 3 weeks ago. The subject line was blank. The body of the message was short and brutal. Do exactly as you are told. If you speak to the authorities, we will handle you. Remember that accidents happen every day. I felt a wave of nausea. Marissa had not just been greedy. She had been terrified. She was being held hostage by her own mistakes. I kept scrolling, looking for the name of the managing partner of the parent company. Finally, on a redacted tax form from 5 years ago, I found a signature that had been carelessly overlooked by the censors. It was a jagged, aggressive scrawl I had not seen in a decade, but I recognized it instantly. Luther Kane. The name hit me like a physical blow. I sat back in the creaky chair, the pieces of the puzzle snapping together with a terrifying clarity. Luther Kane was a shark in the venture capital world, a man who destroyed companies for sport. But to me, he was the man I had humiliated 10 years ago, when I was a senior accountant at Brightwell and Company. Luther had approached me. He wanted me to sign off on a valuation for a tech startup that was clearly inflated. He offered me a bribe. I refused. I reported the discrepancy to the board, killing his deal and costing him an estimated $12 million. I remembered the look in his eyes when he walked past my desk that day. He had stopped, leaned down, and whispered, "You think you are righteous, Eleanor, but you are just a small woman standing in the way of a freight train. Someday, I will run you over." He had waited 10 years. He had not just come for me. He had come for the one thing he knew would destroy me. He had targeted Marissa. He must have orchestrated her introduction to his circle, fed her ego, and handed her the poisoned chalice of $33 million and the house. Suddenly, the eviction made sense. It was not about Marissa wanting a modern mansion. It was about what was in the attic. When I left Brightwell, I had kept copies of the original fraudulent valuation papers Luther had tried to make me sign, along with his handwritten notes on the margins. I had stored them in a box labelled Old Tax Returns in the attic. Luther knew I was a pack rat. He needed me out of the house so his team could gut the place and find the evidence that could link him to past crimes. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a senile old woman crying in a motel room. I reached into my suitcase and pulled out the hard drive I had backed up before leaving the house. I had not just packed clothes, I had packed my life. I plugged it into the laptop and opened the encrypted folder from 10 years ago. There it was. The digital scan of the document Luther Kane had tried to burn. I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur Vance. My hand was steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. "Arthur," I said when he answered, "I know who is behind it. It is Luther Kane." "Kane?" Arthur sounded skeptical. "He is untouchable. Eleanor. Unless you have a smoking gun, going after him is suicide. I have more than a gun." I replied, looking at the file on the screen. "I have the bullet he fired 10 years ago, and it has his fingerprints all over it." I hung up. Luther was preparing to pin the entire laundering operation on Marissa. The documents showed she had signed a general liability waiver without reading it. I was sure that made her personally responsible for all unverified transactions. He was going to let her go to prison for 20 years while he walked away with the money. I had a choice. I could run, take my meager savings, and disappear before his threats turned real. Or I could step into the line of fire to save the daughter who had betrayed me. I looked at the photo of Marissa on the news site. She looked so lost. "You picked the wrong mother to mess with." "Luther," I whispered to the empty room. I closed the laptop. I was not just going to clear my name. I was going to burn his entire empire to the ground. The hard drive hummed on the scarred wooden desk of the motel room, a sound that felt like a heartbeat. I spent 48 hours straight staring at the screen, my eyes burning, fueled only by bad coffee and the cold fire of retribution. I was not just looking at spreadsheets. I was building a weapon. I pulled the old valuation files from 10 years ago and overlaid them with the leaked documents from the Apex Horizon Fund. It was a forensic accounting masterpiece. I traced the wire transfers from the fund directly back to shell corporations that Luther Kane had established a decade prior. He thought he had buried these connections deep enough, but he forgot that I was the one who had spotted the cracks in his foundation the first time around. Once the chain of evidence was undeniable, I did not just sit on it. I created a truncated version of the report, a teaser that showed enough to incriminate, but not enough to reveal the full scope of the leverage I held. I sent it anonymously to the fraud division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I knew how they worked. They would open a file within the hour. But I needed insurance. I called Kevin, a young IT specialist who used to fix my computer at Brightwell and Company. I met him at a crowded coffee shop and handed him a flash drive. "Kevin," I said, sliding a $50 bill across the table, "I need you to set up a dead man's switch. If I do not log in to cancel it every 24 hours, this data gets emailed to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Department of Justice." He looked at the drive, then at me, his eyes wide. "Mrs. Hartley, what have you gotten yourself into?" "Just insurance." "Kevin, just insurance." With the trap set, I put on my best suit. It was a little frayed at the cuffs, but I pressed it until the creases were sharp enough to cut skin. I took a taxi to the financial district. The headquarters of Kane Capital towered above the street, a monument to ego made of glass and steel. I walked past the security desk with a confidence I did not feel. When the receptionist tried to stop me, I simply said, "Tell Mr. Kane that Eleanor Hartley is here to return his file from 1999. 5 minutes later, I was ushered into the penthouse office. Luther Kane sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than my entire house. He had aged, but the arrogance was still there, etched into the lines around his mouth. He did not stand up. "Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. "I must admit, I was surprised to hear your name. I thought you would be, enjoying your retirement in a trailer park by now." I sat down in the leather chair opposite him, placing my handbag on my lap. "And I thought you would be smart enough to cover your tracks better." "Luther. But I suppose arrogance makes people sloppy." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You are playing a dangerous game. You think because you have a few old papers, you can threaten me. This is the real world. Eleanor, it is not some accounting textbook. I have lawyers who can bury you in litigation until you are dust. You are too old and too insignificant to understand how the game is played." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Marissa is going to take the fall. She signed the papers. She enjoyed the money. And you are going to fade away, or my security team will ensure you have a very unpleasant accident." I looked at him, and then I did something he did not expect. I smiled. "You are sweating, Luther," I observed quietly. His eye twitched. "Get out of my office." "I don't think so," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a single sheet of paper. It was the confirmation receipt from the FBI tip line. "You see, I did not come here to blackmail you for money. I came to give you a choice. I have already sent a sample of your laundering scheme to the authorities. They are opening a file as we speak." Luther's face went pale. He snatched the paper from my hand. You crazy witch. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I have just started," I said, my voice hardening. "That was just the appetizer. The full data set, the one that links you personally to the offshore accounts and proves you set Marissa up, is scheduled to go public if anything happens to me, or if my daughter spends one single day in prison." He stared at me, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the desk. The power in the room had shifted. He was no longer the titan of industry. He was a criminal who had been caught. "What do you want?" he hissed. "Money. 5 million, 10. I do not want your dirty money," I replied, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "You are going to instruct your lawyers to recant the statements against Marissa. You are going to provide evidence that she was coerced. You are going to take the blame, Luther, because if you don't, I will make sure the entire world sees exactly how you built your empire. I will destroy you," he whispered, but there was no conviction in it. "You already tried," I said. "And you missed." I turned and walked out of the office. My legs felt like lead, and my heart was pounding in my throat. But I kept my head high. I did not look back. I knew he was scrambling for his phone, yelling at his lawyers, trying to stop the bleeding. But the wound was already deep. The battle was not over. But for the first time, the hunter had become the prey. The call came 3 hours after I left Luther Kane's office. My phone buzzed against the cheap laminate of the motel nightstand, vibrating with a frantic energy that filled the small room. It was Marissa. "Mom." Her voice was barely a whisper, broken by jagged sobs. They just let me go. The agents, they questioned me for 6 hours. "Mom, I am so scared." I did not ask her where she was. I knew. I drove my sedan to the steps of the federal building, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the drizzle. Marissa was standing under the concrete awning. hugging herself as if she were freezing. She looked nothing like the heiress who had commanded me to leave my own home. Her hair was matted, her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked small. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment. She got into the car and immediately collapsed into tears. I didn't know. She gasped, her hands shaking as she reached for me. I didn't know it would get this bad. I did not hug her back. Not yet. I started the engine and drove us away from the prying eyes of the city, pulling into a quiet parking lot near the river. I put the car in park and turned to face her. "Stop crying," I said, my voice steady and hard. "Tears will not fix this. Marissa, you need to tell me the truth, not the version you told the press, not the version you told yourself. The truth." She looked at me, shocked by my tone. She was used to the mother who baked cookies and smoothed over rough edges. That woman was gone. "I wanted to be someone," she whispered, staring at her lap. "Luther. He made me feel important. He said I had vision. When the money came in, the $33 million, I knew it felt wrong. I knew it was too easy. But I didn't want to ask questions because I didn't want the answer to be no. And the house I asked, 'Why did you throw me out?' Was that part of your vision too?" Marissa squeezed her eyes shut, and a fresh wave of tears spilled over. "No, Mom. You have to believe me. That was the only way I could think to protect you." "Protect me," I scoffed. "By making me homeless, Luther asked about you." She cried out, turning to face me, her expression desperate. "He knew you worked at Brightwell. He asked if you were the type to keep old records. He said liabilities needed to be removed. I knew if you were in that house, if you were near those papers, he would come for you. He would hurt you." She took a shuddering breath. "I thought if I kicked you out, if I made it look like I hated you, he would think you were out of the picture. I thought he would leave you alone. I was trying to get you away from the blast radius." I stared at her. It was a twisted, immature logic, born of panic and manipulation. She had hurt me to save me, a decision made by a child playing a game she did not understand. "You were a coward," I said softly. "You let a monster dictate how you treated your own mother." I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. It was a statement of facts I had drafted with Arthur Vance, detailing every interaction she had with Luther, every instruction he gave, and every fraudulent document she had signed under duress. "You are going to sign this," I said, placing it on the dashboard. "You are going to turn state's witness. You are going to testify that Luther Kane orchestrated the entire scheme and that you were his unknowing pawn until it was too late." Marissa recoiled, her face draining of color. "I can't. He will destroy me. He said he has lawyers who can—" "He has nothing." I snapped. "Luther has already cut you loose. Marissa, try calling him. Go ahead." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed. She put it on speaker. The line rang once, twice, and then a mechanical voice answered. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." Marissa dropped the phone. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was alone. The man she had sold her soul for had already erased her from his existence. "He left me," she whispered. "He threw you to the wolves," I corrected. "But I am here, and I have the gun to shoot the wolves. But you have to pull the trigger. Sign the paper. Marissa." She looked at the document, then at me. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook violently, but she pressed the tip to the paper. She signed her name. As soon as she finished, she slumped forward, sobbing into her hands. "I am so sorry. Mum, I am so sorry." I watched her for a long moment. My heart ached for the little girl she used to be, but the accountant in me saw the woman she was. I reached out and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me, burying her face in my shoulder, weeping with the relief of a person who has finally stopped running. I stroked her hair, but I did not close my eyes. I looked out the windshield at the grey river. "I love you, Marissa," I said quietly, my voice close to her ear. "I will always be your mother. But do not think this erases what you did. My love is not unconditional when it comes to betrayal. You broke our trust, and it will take a long time to fix it." She nodded against my shoulder, understanding. We sat there for a moment, two survivors in a battered car. Then I pulled away and started the engine. "Dry your eyes," I said. "We have a hearing to prepare for, and I do not want you looking weak when we take Luther Kane down." The federal hearing room was sterile and cold, smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. I sat in the back row, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Luther Kane sat at the defendant's table, wearing a suit that likely cost more than my annual pension. He looked bored, tapping his gold pen against the mahogany surface as if this were just another tedious board meeting he could bully his way through. He did not know that the board meeting was over, and I had already cast the deciding vote. The prosecutor stood up and adjusted his glasses. He did not start with a speech. He started with a projection on the wall. It was a complex web of red lines and black numbers, a visual map of the money laundering scheme that I had spent 48 hours constructing in a motel room. "This," the prosecutor said, pointing to the center of the web, "is not just a series of bad investments. It is a calculated engine of fraud designed to siphon capital from pension funds into private offshore accounts. And the architect is sitting right there." Luther scoffed, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "This is absurd," he said, leaning into his mic with a sneer. "These are complex financial instruments. You cannot expect a layman, or a disgruntled grandmother with a grudge, to understand high-level arbitrage." The prosecutor did not flinch. He simply picked up a piece of paper from his desk. "We thought you might say that, Mr. Kane, which is why we authenticated this document from 10 years ago. It is a valuation assessment with your handwriting in the margins, instructing a subordinate to bury the debt in the exact same shell company structure you are using today. The witness who provided this refused to sign it then, and she is the one who caught you now." Luther froze. He turned slowly to look at me. I met his gaze. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply stared at him with the cold indifference of a balance sheet that finally equals 0. Then Marissa took the stand. She looked terrified, but when she spoke, her voice was clear. "He told me I was a visionary," she said, gripping the railing of the witness box. "But he never let me see the actual accounts. He just brought me papers and told me that if I trusted him, we would change the world. I was stupid. I was greedy. But I was not the one stealing the money." When the marshals moved in to handcuff Luther, the room erupted in noise. He shouted something about a conspiracy, but nobody was listening. The titan of industry was dragged out the side door, looking small and pathetic. Marissa was granted immunity for her testimony, and because I had successfully proven she lacked the technical knowledge to orchestrate the fraud. We walked out onto the courthouse steps, shielding our eyes from the flashbulbs of the press. "Mom," Marissa said when we finally reached the quiet of the parking garage. Can we go home now? To the house I stopped and looked at her. No. Marissa, the house is gone. The bank will take it to settle the liens you put on it. And even if they didn't, I am not going back there. Then where will we go? She asked, her voice trembling. I am going back to my apartment, I said firmly. I have a life to rebuild. And you have to find your own way. I will help you with a deposit on a studio apartment. But you need to get a job. You need to learn what $1 is actually worth when you have to earn it with sweat. She looked shocked, but she nodded. She understood that the free ride was over. I returned to my small rental. It was not the home I had raised her in. It did not have the oak tree or the porch. But it had peace. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, knowing that the ledger was balanced. 3 months later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Marissa. She was wearing a simple uniform from a local bakery, her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. She did not have a designer bag. She did not have a bodyguard. She dropped to her knees, right there in the hallway. Get up. Marissa, I said gently. You don't need to do that. No, she choked out, tears running down her cheeks. I need to say this. Mom, I am not here for money. I don't want a loan. I tried to make my grandmother's pot roast recipe yesterday, and I burned it. I realized I don't know how to do anything real. I don't know how to be the woman you are. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter, not the stranger the world had created. Please, she whispered. Teach me how to start over. I smiled, stepped back, and opened the door wide. Come inside, I said. The first lesson is that you never kneel for anyone. Now, wash your hands. We have work to do. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this journey, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it.